Black belt rich girl challenges black maid to a fight. What she didn't know surprised everyone. Before the story begins, tell me something. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment down below. I love finding out how far these stories are reaching. And if you're someone who loves intense love stories with plot twists, resilience, and heartwarming endings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep bringing more stories like this one, and helps the channel grow and reach more people who, just like you, really get emotional. Shall we dive in together? Let's go to today's story. The sun was just beginning to rise through the thick branches in Buckhead, one of the richest and most secluded neighborhoods in Atlanta. That's where the massive Whitmore mansion stood, a monument of white columns and mirrored windows where silence was expected and power came naturally. Inside, the footsteps of Kenya Johnson echoed softly on the pristine marble of the grand entrance. Wearing her dark blue uniform and a perfectly pressed white apron, she gently knelt down to clean the last section of the floor, scrubbing with precision. Her hands were calloused, but her movements were firm and graceful, as if she had mastered her own exhaustion. Her black skin glowed in the morning light filtering through the tall windows. Her tightly pinned bun kept her natural curls in place, highlighting her strong facial features. There was dignity in her every move, even the quietest ones. Outside, in the perfectly symmetrical garden, Brooke Whitmore, the youngest daughter of the house, was striking fierce blows at a jiu-jitsu training dummy. Brooke was a young woman with a cold beauty, long blonde hair tied in a ponytail, a narrow face, and blue eyes always half squinting, as if she looked at the world with suspicion. She wore a white gi, personalized with her name embroidered in gold. With every arm lock, she laughed smugly, as if reassuring herself that nothing and no one could defeat her. "Faster, Brooke," said her instructor, a patient grey-haired man. "They'll never stand a chance," she replied, without looking at him. "Not here, not anywhere." Inside, Kenya could hear the sounds coming from the garden. Not with fear, but with a hint of discomfort. She knew exactly what that energy meant, arrogance disguised as discipline. As she finished cleaning the main hallway, she heard the front door open. A uniformed driver entered, carrying 2 elegant suitcases. Right behind him walked in Ethan Whitmore. Ethan was the oldest son of the family. Tall, athletic, and calm-looking, he wore dark jeans, leather boots, and a beige linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His green eyes were serene, and his light brown hair slightly tousled. He didn't seem like someone who belonged in that world of marble and silence. And in many ways, he never had. He walked slowly, taking in the house like each room held old memories, some good, others not. As he turned down the hallway, his gaze met Kenya's. She stood holding a bucket of water, cleaning cloth still in hand. For a moment, time seemed to hesitate. His eyes scanned her face, not with superiority, but with attention. She looked away instinctively, but there was something there, an unexpected energy, a silent recognition. "Sorry," he said politely, stepping aside to let her pass. She responded with a slight nod, eyes downcast, but her heart was racing. Ethan watched her for longer than he probably should have. In the living room, the housekeeper approached. "Mr. Ethan, your mother is still resting in her room. Will you be having lunch with us?" "Yes," he replied, still looking in the direction Kenya had gone. "I'll be staying a few days." Later, Kenya quietly passed through the kitchen and saw him laughing with the cook, asking about the peach sauce she always used to make when he was a boy. He didn't seem like the kind of man who judged others by their job, and for her, that was rare. But what Kenya didn't yet know was that this innocent reunion would be the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change her life, and the life of the entire Whitmore family. That same afternoon, The smell of fresh cornbread spread through the wide kitchen of the Whitmore mansion. The sun cast a golden light through the thin curtains, and the house staff moved quietly, preparing the family's dinner. Kenya, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, calmly washed a set of crystal glasses in the soapstone sink. Her movements were precise, but her mind kept replaying that brief moment she'd had with Ethan earlier in the hallway. She wasn't the type to get distracted by glances. She had been looked at too many times before, and almost always with judgment. But Ethan's look wasn't from someone who saw her as invisible. Brooke entered the kitchen like someone who never needed to ask permission anywhere. She wore workout clothes, tight black leggings and a grey hoodie with the gym's name embroidered on the chest. Her blonde hair was down, still damp from a shower. She had her phone in her hand, but her eyes were fixed on something else, or rather, someone. Brooke watched for a moment as Ethan chatted with the cook, laughing softly, relaxed, as if that place was a safe haven. Then her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw him looking toward Kenya, who kept working, pretending not to notice anything. Funny how some people forget where they came from just because someone notices them, said Brooke, a cold smile tugging at the corner of her mouth as she slowly approached the counter. The room froze for a second. The cook, a cleaning man, and even Ethan, who had just walked in with a glass of water in hand, all turned toward her. Kenya stayed composed. She calmly dried the last glass before replying, her voice steady. "I haven't forgotten where I came from, Miss Brooke." "That's exactly why I know where I stand." Brooke's smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. She let out a dry laugh and continued, "Sure, I just find it interesting how some staff have been so distracted lately. You know, sometimes looking up too much can give you a neck ache. Sometimes looking up is the only way to remember the sky exists," Kenya answered gracefully. Ethan couldn't take the act anymore. He stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Brooke, what's your problem?" She turned to him, surprised, as if she hadn't expected to be confronted. "My problem? I was just talking. It's not my fault if some people feel threatened by words." "You weren't talking," Ethan replied, stepping forward. "You were attacking, and for what? Because someone dared to exist next to you without bowing down." Silence fell like a heavy fog. Brooke let out a sarcastic laugh, but her eyes were trembling. "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. You've always been too sensitive." "Maybe," he said, staring at his sister. "But at least I still know what respect is." Brooke walked out of the kitchen with heavy steps, pretending not to care, but the tension in her jaw gave her away. Kenya stayed still for a few seconds. Her heart was pounding. Not from humiliation, but from being exposed. She had never liked being the center of anything. Ethan approached slowly. "I'm sorry about her," he said quietly. "It's not the first time someone talks to me like that," Kenya replied, without looking at him. "But it's the first time someone speaks up for me." He remained silent, absorbing the weight of her words. Outside, clouds were beginning to form. The sky, once golden, was now turning grey, as if sensing something bigger was coming. But inside Kenya, something had already begun to shift. That house, once made of cold walls and silent commands, was starting to show cracks, and through those cracks, light was coming in. The next day dawned heavy, as if the sky carried the same tension that lingered inside the Whitmore mansion. The atmosphere among the staff was more restrained, and even Brooke avoided walking through the hallways. Ethan, on the other hand, remained quiet, observing everything more closely than usual. After finishing her duties on the ground floor, Kenya was given a new task: to clean the family's old trophy room, a rarely used space tucked behind the main library. The door creaked as it opened, revealing dust-covered shelves, framed gold plaques, and shiny statuettes arranged with meticulous vanity. She stepped in with her bucket and took a deep breath. The smell was of aged wood and nostalgia. She wiped the furniture carefully until something on the back shelf caught her attention. A framed photo of a younger Brooke, smiling with a black belt around her waist and a medal hanging from her neck. Next to her stood George Whitmore, their father, displaying a nearly theatrical pride. Kenya lifted the frame in her hands, and for a moment, her own ghosts rose to the surface. Her gaze hardened, not from anger, but from memory. 10 years, she murmured to herself, and no one ever knew. In that same photo where Brooke flaunted medals, Kenya saw a part of herself that had long been buried. She had also trained in jiu-jitsu for a decade. She started at 13 in the basement of a community church. It was what kept her alive when her world fell apart. She never had a personalized GI or a gold medal, but she had technique. She had strength. She had something no one in that house knew existed. She smiled with irony, a short, melancholy smile. Later that day, toward evening, Kenya took advantage of a break between tasks and sat alone in the backyard beneath an old tree with crooked branches. She took off her sneakers and rested her feet on the grass, breathing deeply. She closed her eyes for a moment, like someone trying to calm an inner storm. "Do you like silence?" Ethan's voice snapped her out of her trance. He was coming from behind, holding a mug of tea, dressed in a light shirt and linen pants. There was something about him at that moment, maybe the respectful way he approached without intruding, that made her not get up right away. "Sometimes silence is the only place where you can hear yourself," she replied, without turning around. He sat down at a respectful distance, resting his arms on his knees. "I saw you in the trophy room today. Were you looking at Brooke?" Kenya took a deep breath before answering. "I was remembering." "Remembering what?" "Who I used to be. Or what I still am, even if no one knows it." Ethan stayed silent, listening intently. "I trained jiu-jitsu for 10 years, she said, her voice low but steady. "Not because I wanted to be a champion. It was the only place where the world stopped hurting." She then told him, with few words but deep emotion, about how she lost her partner in a poorly explained robbery, how she was left alone with a small daughter, about the nights she spent scrubbing staircases by day and training at night to keep from falling apart. "I'm not just the woman who cleans the floors in this house, Mr. Ethan, and I don't want pity. I just want respect." He looked at her with a mix of surprise and admiration. "You speak like someone who's fought more off the mat than on it." She looked at him, for the first time without averting her eyes. "That's because it's true." The silence between them had changed. It was heavier now, filled with something new. It was no longer just an exchange of words. It was the beginning of an exchange of truths. Ethan gave a small smile, one born of genuine respect. "I'd love to see you fight one day." "Maybe one day you will," Kenya replied, standing and picking up her sneakers. "But the real fights in this house don't happen in the ring." As she walked away, Ethan watched her like someone seeing a world that had been invisible until now. And for the first time, he didn't see a staff member. He saw a woman. And he knew, right then, that he would never see her any other way again. That night, the Whitmore mansion was more brightly lit than usual. The traditional Saturday dinner, usually reserved for family, now included guests, long-time investors, 2 local politicians, and a famous jiu-jitsu coach that Brooke was eager to impress. The long table was covered with a white linen tablecloth and gleaming French china. In the center, a luxurious flower arrangement competed for attention with the crystal glasses clinking during polite conversation and fake laughter. Kenya moved around the room discreetly, serving wine with impeccable posture. She wore the staff's most formal uniform, a white blouse with tight cuffs, neatly pressed black pants, and a tight bun on top of her head. Her eyes rarely strayed from her duties, but she noticed everything, including Brooke's increasingly agitated glances at the ease with which Ethan interacted with Kenya, with kind words, with genuine smiles. It was a discomfort Brooke couldn't quite name, but she knew she wanted it gone. After dessert, while the conversation turned to athletic achievements and international medals, Brooke spoke up with a smile dripping in venom. "Funny. Today I found out one of our staff members here also has some experience in jiu-jitsu," she said, still holding her fork, as if talking about the weather. Imagine that. 10 years of training. And no one knew. The conversation paused for a second. The guests looked at each other, unsure if it was a joke or a compliment. Kenya remained near the fireplace, arranging the empty glasses on a silver tray. Her shoulders stayed firm, but the air around her felt suspended. Brooke leaned forward, eyes fixed on Kenya. "Kenya, is it true? Or did you just learn from watching YouTube videos?" Some guests laughed. Others simply looked away, embarrassed. Ethan straightened up in his chair, his jaw tight. Kenya placed the tray on the sideboard and turned calmly. Her eyes met Brooke's without haste. "It's true," she said, her voice clear. "I learned the hard way. But I learned." "Then why have you never competed?" Brooke challenged, as if that nullified everything. 10 years and no trophies? What a waste. Kenya gave a small smile, one of those smiles that doesn't come from the mouth, but from the soul. "Some trophies we carry on the inside." The room fell completely silent. Brooke raised an eyebrow and, with mockery in her tone, lifted her glass. "Well, if you've got the courage, how about a friendly match? Right here, just for fun, of course. Let's see if your theory works in practice." The atmosphere teetered between nervous laughter and shock. Ethan looked at his sister in disbelief. Their mother, now more frail, coughed in the background, clearly uncomfortable with how things were unfolding. Kenya didn't move. She simply crossed her arms gently and replied with a calmness that hurt more than any shout. "Be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get it." Brooke kept smiling, but her eyes burned inside. She knew, even if she wouldn't admit it, that Kenya wasn't like the others, and that maybe she had gone too far. "Then it's settled," she said, raising her glass like she was sealing a deal. "Sunday, late afternoon, a light match, nothing major." "For you, maybe," Kenya replied, picking up the tray of glasses and walking out of the room with her head held high. Ethan stayed seated, but his eyes were fixed on nothing. He knew this wasn't just provocation. It was a calculated, cruel attempt at public humiliation. And he also knew Kenya wasn't the kind of woman who let herself be taken down without a fight. Upstairs, as the lights slowly dimmed, Brooke watched the garden through her bedroom window. Outside, the wind blew hard, shaking the tall trees like it could sense the storm that was about to begin. The next morning, the mansion was still asleep when Ethan came down the stairs in silence, wearing a simple t-shirt and dark sweatpants. His face carried a weight he couldn't quite explain, like something inside him had awakened with the sun. He passed the dining room, where traces of the previous night's dinner still lingered. Crooked glasses, forgotten napkins. Everything looked the same. But nothing was. He walked through the hallway to the back of the house and stepped into the garden, where the grass was still wet with dew. Kenya was there, kneeling near the side shed, organizing cleaning supplies into a box. She wore yellow gloves, her hair tied back in a simple bun. Her face was serene, but there was a quiet strength in her posture, as if her body was already prepared for what was to come. Ethan stopped a few feet away, watching her for a few seconds before speaking. "You don't have to do this." She looked up slowly, not surprised, like she'd been expecting him. "Good morning," she said with a slight smile. "I thought everyone was still asleep." "I woke up with my head spinning," he replied, stepping closer. "I kept thinking about what happened last night, what Brooke did. That wasn't fair." Kenya took off her gloves and stood, wiping her hands on the cloth at her waist. "Justice isn't something I expect. It's something I've learned to carry with me, even when no one else does." "Are you going to accept her challenge?" he asked more directly now. She took a deep breath. Her dark eyes met his calmly. "I'm not fighting Brooke," she said, her voice steady. "I'm fighting what she represents. Arrogance, inherited privilege, the idea that some are born to rule and others to bow. That's followed me for as long as I can remember, and last night, she challenged all of that, in public." Ethan stayed silent. There was a lump in his throat. The woman standing before him wasn't just brave. She was someone who had survived battles he could never imagine facing. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he murmured, eyes glassy. "And I don't even really know your last name." Kenya smiled faintly, though her eyes were now misty too. "Johnson. Kenya Johnson. Born in South Atlanta, daughter of a maid, single mother. Purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but invisible in any room where power sits. And still, here I am." The silence between them deepened. Ethan stepped a little closer. She didn't move back. "I don't know what's happening to me," he said, almost in a whisper. "But when I'm around you, everything feels clearer." Before he could think too much, Ethan gently took her by the arm and kissed her. It was an impulsive kiss, warm, tense, and full of truth. Kenya kissed him back, but only for a second, then pulled away, eyes wide. Both of them were breathless and stunned by their own boldness. "I'm sorry," he said, confused. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "Don't apologize, I just didn't expect it." They stared at each other for another moment, speechless. Something had been born there, in the middle of the unexpected, something not even fear could erase. Meanwhile, upstairs in the mansion, Brooke scrolled through the household files on her tablet. She felt there was something more behind Kenya's confidence, something that had been bothering her since the night before. When she typed Kenya's full name into the database and read the info on an old job application, her eyes widened. There were scanned certificates, competition photos, school trophies, and a copy of a 2013 community newspaper. Kenya Johnson wins regional tournament and moves the crowd, dedicating victory to her young daughter. Brooke squeezed the tablet so hard her fingers turned white. What had started as contempt turned into fear. And that fear turned into rage. She couldn't accept that the woman who cleaned the corners of her house was a real threat to her reputation, and even less, that she was winning her own brother's attention. Her reflection appeared in the mirror beside her, and for the first time, Brooke didn't see superiority in her face. She saw desperation. Sunday arrived with clear skies, bright sun, and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of Buckhead's ancient trees. But inside the Whitmore mansion, the mood was far from peaceful. The backyard had been turned into an improvised ring, surrounded by elegant chairs and curious guests. The neatly trimmed lawn now held a mat set up specifically for the friendly duel, as Brooke had mockingly announced. But to Kenya, there was nothing friendly about that afternoon. Among the guests were familiar faces from the local elite, businessmen, athletes, politicians, and high society members, sipping champagne like they were attending summer theatre. Fake smiles, hidden bets, malicious whispers. The fight between the lady of the house and the maid was already a viral topic even before it started. Ethan watched from a distance, near the side entrance, arms crossed and jaw tight. He wore a white shirt open at the collar, his eyes fixed on the mat. When he saw Kenya appear through the trees, his heart pounded. She wore simple black pants and a fitted white t-shirt. She was barefoot. There were no logos, no official uniform, no visible medals from her past. But her steps were firm and silent, and her gaze was pure steel. Brooke entered minutes later, her black belt tied perfectly and a custom gi with her name stitched in gold. She walked like someone who had already won, waving to guests with rehearsed confidence. "Let's make this quick," she said, as she approached Kenya. "I don't want to be late for dinner." Kenya looked at her calmly. "Don't worry, it won't take long." The announcer signaled the start of the match. The sound faded, and the world seemed suspended for a moment. The two women greeted each other with a minimal gesture, and then it began. In the first few seconds, Brooke advanced with agility and technique. She attempted a lateral takedown, managed to control Kenya's torso, and skillfully locked her arm. The guests applauded, convinced it would be a quick win. Ethan leaned forward, worried. But Kenya didn't fight like someone who wanted to win. She fought like someone who had already survived. With surgical calm, she adjusted her hips, turned her body, and executed a quick spin that even caught Brooke off guard. She escaped the hold and, in a precise movement, trapped Brooke's leg with both arms. Brooke tried to react, but her center of gravity was already lost. Silence fell over the garden. With a firm move, Kenya brought her down. No brute force, no violence, just control. Brooke hit the mat, breathless, her eyes stunned. She tried to escape, but Kenya, with a reverse arm lock, kept her pinned. Then, with her face close to Brooke's, she murmured, "You wanted to expose me. Now look who's exposed." Brooke tapped the mat, signaling surrender, humiliated. For a few seconds no one reacted. Then the unexpected, applause. It started timidly, from one or two guests. Then others joined in. It wasn't applause for the spectacle. It was for the surprise, for the dignity of someone no one expected to see there. Kenya stood up, breathing steadily, and extended a hand to Brooke. The magnate's daughter looked at her with silent rage and turned her face away. Ethan couldn't hold back his emotion. His eyes welled up, his chest conflicted. He had never been so proud of anyone. He had never felt so strongly that standing before him was a woman who would change his life. Kenya walked off the mat with slow steps. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her arms. She hadn't fought for applause. She fought for respect. And for the first time, she was heard. From the upper balcony, George Whitmore watched everything with an unreadable expression. Behind him, Brooke climbed the stairs alone, her hair loose and her pride in shambles. But the night wasn't over, and neither were the consequences of what had just happened. Night fell over Buckhead, but the Whitmore mansion was far from its usual quiet. After Kenya's unexpected victory, guests scattered into small groups throughout the garden, discussing the match with shock, admiration, and in some cases, sheer discomfort. What was supposed to be an elitist prank had turned into an upset spectacle, and the humiliation landed on the wrong side of the bet. Brooke climbed the veranda stairs with heavy steps, her face still marked by sweat and wounded pride. The GI, now misaligned, no longer symbolized control, but the shattered mask of someone who had lost more than just a match. Kenya, meanwhile, remained near the side of the house, briefly speaking with the housekeeper and gently declining congratulations from two staff members. She was about to enter through the back when she heard Brooke's fast steps returning to the garden. "So that's it?" Brooke shouted, coming down the stairs again with fire in her eyes. "You didn't want respect. You wanted the Whitmore name. All eyes turned to her. The guests fell silent, surprised by her tone. Kenya turned slowly, expressionless. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, trying to remain calm. "Of course you are," Brooke shot back, laughing bitterly. "You seduced my brother, played humble, played quiet, and now you want a seat at the table. That's what you do, isn't it? Climb the social ladder pretending to be a victim." Ethan stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air louder than expected. "That's enough, Brooke." She turned, surprised, but he didn't back down. "You want to talk about manipulation, about appearances. You don't see anyone but your own reflection." The crowd grew tense. An uncomfortable silence took over the garden. Since you were a teenager, everything had to revolve around you. If someone shines, you dim them. If someone loves, you mock them. Kenya did nothing but be herself, and that threatens you more than any loss. Brooke's gaze shifted between disbelief and pain. George Whitmore, who had remained inside the house until then, stepped out with a stern expression. He saw the chaos and tried to contain the situation with a discreet gesture. "Brooke, Ethan, please. This is not the time." "No, Dad," Ethan interrupted. "That time has long passed. And as long as everyone keeps pretending nothing's wrong, she'll keep stepping on people who can't fight back." Kenya looked at him. There was emotion on her face, but also something deeper. Resolve. "It's okay," she said firmly. "I don't need this." She turned to the housekeeper and spoke with the same dignity she'd shown in the fight just hours earlier. "I'll finish my shift tomorrow. I'll leave everything clean, organized and at peace. But after that, I'm not coming back." Ethan stepped forward. "You don't have to leave because of her." Kenya looked at him kindly, but with firmness. "I'm not leaving because of her. I'm leaving because I won't stay in a place where my existence needs to be justified." She turned and entered the house, leaving behind a silence no one dared to break. Brooke stood frozen for a few seconds, as if she had lost control of her own performance. When she looked around and saw the judging eyes of the guests, even her father, she lowered her head, defeated by a truth even her ego couldn't hide. Ethan remained alone in the garden, heart torn between outrage and helplessness. He didn't know how yet, but he would do whatever it took to change that ending. Because for the first time, it wasn't the house that mattered. It was who got lost when its door closed. The night hung heavy over Atlanta. The lights of the wealthy neighborhoods glowed in the distance, but Ethan drove in the opposite direction, weaving through narrow streets and hills forgotten by time. The GPS barely worked in that area, and he didn't care. Something stronger guided him, the certainty that he couldn't let her leave without saying what needed to be said. The neighborhood where Kenya lived was simple, but full of life. Children played on the sidewalk, neighbors chatted on porches with glasses of iced tea in hand, and the smell of homemade food filled the air. Ethan walked slowly, wearing a light blue linen shirt and soft slacks. He felt curious eyes around him, but he didn't change course. He climbed the 2 wooden steps of the weather-worn house with a clothesline strung up in the side yard. On the porch, Kenya sat in an old rocking chair, a blanket over her knees and an open book in her lap. Beside her, a girl of about 8 played with handmade dolls with braided yarn hair. It was her daughter, with the same large, expressive eyes and the same calm strength her mother carried. Kenya looked up and saw him. For a second, she didn't move. Then, she gently closed the book. "How did you find me?" she asked, not angry, just surprised. "You showed me more about yourself in 2 weeks than my whole family has in a lifetime," Ethan said, stepping closer. "I needed to see where that strength was born." Kenya signaled for her daughter to go inside, and the girl, obedient, kissed her cheek and disappeared through the screen door, leaving the 2 of them alone on the porch in silence. "You should be at the mansion," she said, crossing her arms. "And you should be somewhere where you don't have to explain yourself to anyone, he replied without hesitation. I didn't come here on a whim, Kenya. I came because I chose to. I chose to be where you are. She looked down, struggling against the urge to believe. Ethan took a step closer. You were never just an employee, never invisible. You taught me what courage is, what it means to stand your ground without losing your soul. And I don't want that house anymore. I don't want those parties, those fake smiles. I want this ground, this truth. Kenya looked at him, torn between caution and desire. Ethan, I have a daughter. I have bills. I'm not part of your world. I don't want you to enter my world, he said, voice thick with emotion. I want to build a new one with you. Silence fell like a soft veil. The wind stirred the leaves of the tree in front of the porch. Her eyes shimmered under the streetlight. Are you sure about this? She whispered. Ethan stepped even closer, now inches from her face. I'm sure about you. This time, when he kissed her, she didn't hesitate. She didn't pull back, didn't flinch. She kissed him back, eyes closed, soul open. It was a deep kiss, not impulsive passion, but two worlds finally meeting without fear. Across the street, a neighbor quietly watched through her curtain, and for a moment, love conquered prejudice. The months that followed changed not just lives, but convictions. Ethan, true to the decision he made on that porch, officially resigned from all roles in the Whitmore family business. He turned down bonuses, gave up positions, and sold the penthouse he was to inherit in downtown Atlanta. In its place, he chose a simple townhouse in the city's south side, just 2 blocks from where Kenya lived with her daughter. The move, which many thought would be temporary, proved permanent. Alongside Kenya, Ethan founded the Root Project, a martial arts school for youth in underserved neighborhoods, offering free classes in jiu-jitsu, boxing, and self-defense. The name came from a conversation between them, sitting under the same porch tree. The strongest trees, Kenya had said, aren't the tallest, they're the ones with the deepest roots. The building for the project was a once-abandoned repair shop. With their hands and their hearts, they renovated the space. They painted the walls, laid donated mats, and hung at the entrance a carved wooden sign that read, "Here, everyone has the right to defend themselves, even from being forgotten." Classes started with 5 students. Within 3 months, there were over 50. Kids, teens, single mothers, veterans. People who'd been invisible, finally seen. And everyone knew who the founders were, not as distant idols, but as living examples of resilience. Meanwhile, far from there, Brooke faced her own process. After the scandal of the fight, which went viral with footage of her humiliating defeat and Kenya's words echoing across the internet, her public image took a hit. Brands cancelled contracts, gyms stopped inviting her to speak, and even training partners drifted away. She spent weeks locked inside the family mansion, avoiding mirrors and ignoring her phone. Until one day, crossing a hallway and seeing an old photo of her and Ethan, smiling together as children, something inside her broke. The following week, Brooke started therapy. At first, she was silent, said little, but little by little, stuck words began to come out. The therapist listened patiently, and when Brooke finally said, "I became the woman I feared the most, the one who fakes strength to hide fear," it was like learning to breathe again. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was a start. One morning, alone in the mansion's kitchen, Brooke turned on the TV and saw a news segment about the Root Project. It showed Kenya at the center of the mat, surrounded by smiling kids, and beside her, Ethan, in a white t-shirt, holding a brown belt just awarded to a student. The journalist asked, "What's the most moving part of this project for you?" Ethan replied, looking at Kenya, "Watching someone rise after being pushed down for years. That changes everything. Brooke turned off the TV, eyes glassy. For the first time, not with anger, just silence. The official inauguration of the Root Project arrived with clear skies, colourful flags strung from wall to wall of the renovated gym, and an improvised stage made of wooden crates and old rugs. Neighbourhood residents trickled in, some curious, others familiar, students in simple uniforms, belts tied with pride around their waists. Children ran around, families took photos. It wasn't luxurious, but it radiated dignity. Kenya, wearing a white shirt with the project's name across the chest and black training pants, adjusted the last details on the microphone, while Ethan helped volunteers arrange chairs for the guests. He was calm, focused, but attentive to her every move. "Are you sure you want to speak?" he asked, handing her a glass of water. She took the glass, smiled gently and said, "Speaking isn't the hard part. The hard part was spending years swallowing everything I wanted to say." Ethan held her hand for a moment. "Then today you speak for everyone who still can't." They looked at each other for a few seconds. It was more than connection. It was the strength of two worlds that had chosen one another. At 5:00 p.m., the audience settled. The applause died down as Kenya stepped onto the small stage. She took a deep breath. The mic crackled slightly before falling silent, as if the universe were asking for attention. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began. Her voice was steady, but gentle. "Thank you for being here. Today is not just the opening of a physical space. It's the beginning of a place where many of us, for the first time, will be seen as whole." The audience listened silently. Ethan, front row, watched her with teary eyes. "The hardest fight I've ever faced," she continued, "wasn't against another person. It was against a system that repeats every day that some lives matter more than others, that some stories deserve to be heard, and others don't." She paused. Emotion threatened her voice, but she breathed and carried on. "The hardest fight isn't on the mat. It's the one no one sees, against silence, against prejudice, against the belief that some people don't belong in certain places. But we do, we always have." At that moment, Ethan joined her on stage and silently held her hand. The audience gave a standing ovation, not the enthusiastic applause of a show, but the reverence of witnessing something real. Among those present, almost hidden in the back row, Brooke sat quietly. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a dark t-shirt, her hair down, no makeup, no posture of superiority, just attentive eyes. And for the first time, no contempt, just silence. She hadn't announced her visit. She arrived alone, sat discreetly, and stayed. She watched everything with a face that blended discomfort, guilt, and, above all, something new: humility. When the applause faded, Kenya stepped down from the stage. She walked toward the students, hugged children, greeted neighbors. She was embraced as one of them, not above, but alongside. Brooke remained seated for a few minutes. Then she stood, and without drawing attention, left the gym. But as she passed a small wooden counter where there was a glass, the same kind Kenya used to serve in the Whitmore mansion, she paused. She looked at it for a few seconds, and in a simple gesture, placed a small donation in the envelope beside it. It was symbolic. But for the first time, Brooke did something not to be seen. She did it because she was finally learning to see. Inside, Ethan and Kenya embraced among laughter and grateful smiles. The project had begun. So had their story. But what mattered most was that now they no longer had to hide who they were, and the glass that once served only silence was now full of truth. So, what did you think of this story? I'd really love to hear your opinion. Leave a comment with a score from 0 to 10, telling me how much this story moved you. It helps me a lot to understand which stories truly touch your heart. If you liked it, give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves deep stories too, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. And before you go, hold on just one more second. I picked another powerful story that will move you even more and show you that sometimes all it takes to make the impossible happen is courage. I'll see you there.